have gone on for a while, except for the fact that they've become woefully out of date, and so it's become a little bit of a bigger deal because in order to kind of like get them up to date quickly without it taking 100 years, a number of neighborhoods have been kind of combined together. So it's a little bit of a larger thing, but the same kind of idea of creating a vision and a plan for the next 20 years so that you have the benchmark and you have a direction that you know that you want to go in order to create the community that the neighbors want to create. So welcome to that, and thank you for being involved, or I hope that you are going to get involved as we move forward. Right now, oh, and then some of you may be at chairs that have these index cards and golf pencils, and that's because that's how you're going to, if you've got questions, write them on the index cards. And then when you're finished writing the question on the index card, just hold it up, and I'll come over and I'll grab it. What's going to happen is invariably a few of you will ask the same question or very similar questions, and so we'll just group them together so that we don't have the same question being asked over and over again. And then when you hand your card in and I take it, I'll be happy to hand you another blank card for the next question that you want to ask. If you don't have a card, then just raise your hand and I'll make sure that we'll grab you one. There are some on chairs perhaps nearby you. Okay. So I want to introduce our moderator for the evening. Antonio is going to take it from here.
Perfect. Thank you, Frank. So just real quick, I want to explain tonight's proceedings. So we're going to start off with a couple of remarks from Councilman Hinds. Afterwards, we'll have 45 minutes for panel presentation on the matter. We'll then go to 45 minutes for Q&A, 20 minutes of prepared questions, and 25 minutes for your questions. So let me introduce Councilman Hinds. You and I got to know each other real well. We're competing against each other. He's a fantastic guy. Councilman.
Hi. I was told you were supposed to speak from up here and use the microphone. I'm not sure exactly why, but because everyone else has been down there. But maybe it's for the camera. My name is Chris Hinds. I'm the councilperson for Dewitt City Council's District 10. So in case you don't know where that is, that's Uptown, Capitol Hill, Golden Triangle, Cheeseman, Congress, Cherry Creek Country Club, and Belcarro. So thank you guys and thank you all of you, not just guys. Thank all of you for coming tonight. I'm really excited to have you here. I'm feeling a little under the weather, so I apologize if I don't seem as excited as I should be. I'm really excited to be here. That's just my poker face. So I have just 3 quick things that I wanted to talk about. So the first thing is NPI, the Neighborhood Planning Initiative, and hopefully that's part of the reason why we're here tonight. The Neighborhood Planning Initiative is a conversation, it's an ongoing process that documents this. It's a document that documents the ongoing conversation between government, developers, and neighbors. And so it's really important for us to have this process so that we can have this guiding document that we use, or in many cases multiple documents, so that we can say, hey, we've come together, we've had a stakeholder process. The stakeholder process usually is multiple years, and in this case, the East Central and East Area plans have both been ongoing for more than 2 years each, and so this is it's a long process, but we want to make sure that we get it right and we actually have a document that really truly reflects, again, the relationship between government, developers, and the people. So let's talk about development. So obviously, developers are for-profit companies in many cases, in most cases, and it's their job to maximize shareholder value. Well, who cares about the people? Government's supposed to care about the people, and that's why I'm here tonight, and that's why we have several city folks here tonight as well, is to make sure that we have your input documented. Development in the city should happen for the people, not to the people, and that's a really important component of the planning process. And so again, I'm glad that you are here tonight so that we can make sure the development's happening for you. The final thing that I wanted to say is we've talked about the neighborhood planning initiative. There are also several other documents that if you're nerdy about urban planning, you've probably heard of, and that's, we've just a couple months ago, City Council adopted, or the city for that matter, adopted Blueprint Denver and the Blueprint Denver 2019 and the Comprehensive Plan 2040. And the reason there are dates assigned to that is because it was actually a process, this is round 2, and the first process, to Frank's point where we went, he's in the back, is that the first round of both of those documents were back in 2000 and 2002. So I think we can all agree that the city has changed a bit since 2000, and so it's really important for us to continue to gussy up our plans, or if it's been 20 years, redo them. And so, so the blueprint is for the entire city, and these neighborhood planning initiatives for the 70-something, 76, 70-something neighborhoods, 78 neighborhoods in the city of Denver. I just care about District 10, sorry. The 78 neighborhoods in Denver, we're taking them chunks at a time, and the East and East Central area plans have 6 neighborhoods. So Blueprint is the overall guiding document for the whole city, but these neighborhood plans are really, let's get down to brass tacks, let's get down to specific streets, and let's say, should we have a bike lane on this street or not? And really, I mentioned that because that's a controversial topic, and really that's it. I'm glad that we're having this conversation because it's better that we have it now before we put it into a document that's voted on by council than to complain afterwards. So again, thank you for coming. I'm done. And I wanted to give a special shout out to Antonio Mendez. We were opponents in this campaign. As we saw later in the process, we were actually pretty heavily, our values were quite aligned. So I'm really excited that he's here tonight, and I'm looking forward to, as much as I can. I had a fever last night. I'll try to stay as long as I can. How about that? So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And I'll pay you the 20 that I owe you later. I'd like to call up the panelists to come join me on the stage. First, I'd like to call up Niccolo Casewit, architect. Come on up. Next, I'd like to call up Anna Dewitt, Congress Park Neighbors member, UPS school teacher, and former school board candidate, former lead applicant for the Green Flats project. Next, I'd like to call up Cheney Bostic, the principal for the Studio C Urban Design and Planning. Sorry, give me 1 second here. I'd like to call up Matt Bossler. He's a principal of Shift Planning and Design LLC. Also, I'd like to call up Amy Levinsky, the executive director of Historic Denver. And I'd like to call up Mark Marshall, director of real estate, urban land conservancy. Oh, Kevin, come on. I'm sorry about that. Kevin Mathis, apologies. So, we'll start off with our first presentation. Niccolo.
I'm up first.
You are up first. Okay, we'll do Anna first. Apologies.
Oh, great. You guys can all call me Sister Dewitt. I love it. Yes, can we actually move on to the next slide? I have access. Great. So hi, everyone. I'm Anna Dewitt, a teacher at North High School, which is a DPS school. And though I'm not here as a representative of DPS, I want to discuss the major issues facing our schools and how things such as the East Area Plan and East Central Plan can help improve them. Two of these things are racial segregation brought on by neighborhood segregation and a low DPS enrollment, despite an increasing population growth. And as a teacher, one of my favorite quotes has been, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. And for today, I'd like to rewrite that as if you think change is scary, try the status quo. Now this is a dissimilarity chart. This is actually highlighted in the Denver Post this Sunday, and this graph shows how much of the population would have to relocate in order for the place to equalize, or in this case, our schools to integrate. The higher the number, the higher the racial segregation. And is pretty high on there. It's actually meaning that more than half of our schools are fairly segregated. And here are actually the demographics of schools in East Central Denver. 70% of DPS students are Black or brown children, yet looking at these numbers, we can see that those children don't go to East Central schools. I'd also like to point out that DPS has for years tried to combat segregation, and they actually even resorted to busing. It's time we allow our neighborhoods to integrate. Through inclusive missing middle zonings, our schools can also integrate. Moving on to school enrollment, DPS is projecting a decreased enrollment. In this chart, pink represents decreasing enrollment, while blue increasing enrollment. And we can also see that, we're forecast to decrease by 5% in 2023. And believe me, I know this may not seem real. My classes are busting out of the seams as well, but low enrollment doesn't actually affect classroom size. And because I was skeptical, I met about this figure. I met with the CFO of DPS, and he said that yes, while Denver is projecting growth in population, young families with children are not moving to Denver. And this is because we build single-family bedroom apartments and high-rises, and we don't allow missing middle units. Now, why does this matter for you? Perhaps you don't have children, perhaps you send your children to a private school, but you still pay taxes. And for every school that has less than 215 students, DPS subsidizes that amount. And so actually last year, we paid $14 million in subsidies for low-enrolled schools. These schools right here. And for my final thought, I also want to point out that while our enrollment has decreased in DPS, DPS families who earn below median wage has decreased significantly from 62 to 56%. So what that means is that while we're losing families with children in DPS, we're losing specifically low-income families in DPS. We can do better, and please be a part of the change and support the East Area Central Plan. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, no problem. Perfect, thanks. So my name's Kevin Matthews. I'm a part of UMI Denver, and I live in Commerce Park. And basically the thing I wanted to talk about was climate change tonight. If you go through the blueprint, there's maybe a half dozen references to climate change, and maybe a few paragraphs. But this statement sort of does sum it up, and it's probably an understatement. So I just want to kind of, all right, there we go. All right. So I just want to level set. So this is basically where we're at. If you've never seen this graph before, these are carbon mitigation curves. The two things that I really want to point out is that as the lines get higher, meaning that we take longer to actually start cutting carbon emissions, you have to cut emissions much faster than we're prepared to do. Then these negative lines down here, the first time I saw this, I wasn't really sure what it was, but it was explained to me that this is basically net negative emissions that would be required to keep us below 2 degrees by the year 2040. And we actually don't really know how to do that. In 2040, my son will be in his mid-20s. So this is Denver. This is from coolclimates.org. And as you can see, the little arrows pointing to where we're right now, Capitol Hill and Cheesman Park. So the green section, the dark green is the lowest carbon emissions, and the red areas are higher carbon emissions. So basically these areas are about 2.5 times higher than the carbon per household in Denver. This is a breakdown by some of the neighborhoods in Denver, as you can see. And when you start to look at this, a couple of reasons become really clear. Part of it is that, the variety of homes, we often have smaller homes here, so we use less electricity, also less natural gas. But the big one is the number of miles that we actually drive. So if you're in a more walkable, bikeable neighborhood, it's going to be more sustainable. And just to point out that this doesn't mean that all of Lodo or Cap Hill is sustainable, because all of these emissions have to go down basically in half in the next 10 years and to zero by 2050. So this is something this is from Logan Meyer, who writes the blog Strong Towns Denver, and I just want to explain what this is. So there's something called the brittleness bubble, which is basically the vulnerability of our infrastructure to climate change. Basically, climate change is going to cost us a lot of money. So right now, we spend about 34% of our taxes are spent on capital infrastructure, and that number is probably going to go up. So this is basically a list of parcels in Denver, in East Central neighborhood, and the green ones basically are the ones where the property tax actually supports itself, supports the infrastructure it uses. The yellow is subsidized by sales tax, red is heavily subsidized, and the dark red is crippling infrastructure debt. You can see that, Capitol Hill's doing a little bit better than Commerce Park. This is the east area for comparison. So this is not sustainable. This last one is this is actually a duplex in Portland, Oregon, and this is from an article from the Sightline Institute, who's done research about duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes that can basically cut carbon emissions by 20% minimum, and often more depending on where the neighborhood is. I don't know if you saw that Oregon recently legalized these throughout the state, and part of it was due to affordability, and part of it was due to carbon emissions. So, pass it off to Nico.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me and see okay? I'm going to have to try this. So what I'm trying to do is cover 100 years of Denver zoning, or lack of zoning, in 6 minutes. I think I've got it down to about 8 minutes. So I'm going to click through really, really fast, and we can come back to whatever you want to talk about in the questions. First of all, Denver, and Colfax, it was called Grand Avenue originally, but it expanded eastward based on the extension of the cable cars and the trolleys, and extended linearly. Quite often, before the development, you had the transit to support that development ahead of time. So that's one of the challenges that we're looking at, is that we're doing certain things over again, and we're doing certain things to promote a different kind of future. But some of this is back to the future, and I think I'm trying to focus a little bit on what we can learn from the past. And I'm going to just click through some images really quickly so I can stay on time here. Thank you. So it just kept expanding, but you see, it's not just about Colfax, it's also about the connectivity north to south across Colfax in different parts. And, early on, it was planned that with the subdivision, there would be a substantial amount of open space, including our major park. And you can see how the plat actually accounts for the different dimensions, the reserving space for what will become East High School, for example. There was also early on a vision called the Rondelet Plan that really set down the idea that boulevards and streets and the streetcar system would link open spaces as well, and that they were integral to the further development and improvement of life. And there wasn't just a focus on Colfax. There was a lot of redundant streetcars. In fact, there was a streetcar on 17th, on Colfax, on 13th, and on 11th. And then when it expanded earlier to the south, we had several lines that were basically offshoots from Broadway. So one can see that including the neighborhoods in your transit system, however it turns out, is really, really key, and it's not just focused on Colfax. People walked until they couldn't. And finally, there was infill, and it was with the missing middle building types. And I'm going to click through very quickly. Most of these types are unbuildable now with the current code. That's the original slap home. I need more time for that. And quite often you'll see 4-story buildings. I'm looking for the GMU4 as a compromise somewhere. Everything changed in 2010 with the new building code, but it started essentially as a way to separate out the country club and the parkways and everything else in 1923, the Roaring Twenties. And it kind of ended up getting layered to the point where a suburban code was enforced by 1956 due to the desegregation laws and also just a sense of competition with the suburbs. It was supposed to be simpler and easier and more predictable, the new zoning code. And what we're going to say basically, from a practitioner's point of view, we need either more building types or we need more flexibility, or both. That's not possible today. That's a 4-story building, isn't it? Then what happened in 2012 pretty much was that we were just saying no to 7-story high-rises, even if they're mid-rises. And, we lost some of the flexibility in the original code of R3 and R2 because some things just bumped up. This is actually a remodel in Capitol Hill. We had more flexibility in landscaping and providing, with a floor area ratio, you could choose and justify an adaptive reuse, such as the conversion of the Stevens School. You could shift and push a building forward so it only had a 10-foot front setback instead of maybe a required street setback of 20 as an average. You could put in side courts and create south-facing open space. And certainly, with the new code, I include ADUs and tandem homes as part of the missing middle. Really a proponent of attached ADUs as well as fitting in large lots with fairly large houses. This one is one of the few that's not in the neighborhood. It's in Highland. So finally, in conclusion, missing middle building typologies include a whole range of building types. And as we saw in some of the pictures, there were a lot of 6-unit buildings. There were a lot of larger mansions that were subdivided in different units. And we need to change some of the forms to allow for more variability rather than predictability, particularly in the roof forms. So that's my advice going forward. Thank you.
Thank you for helping us define the problem. Now to help us identify some solutions, I'd like to invite up Cheney.
Hi everyone, my name is Cheney Bostic. I am representing my firm Studio Seed. We are part of the consultant team leading up the land use recommendations for the East Central Area Plan. There are many recommendations in this plan, and it is still being drafted. It has not even come to a public release yet, although you all are here because you know about it and we've been talking about it and meeting with the community over the last 2 years. Tonight I want to present some of our recommendations for that are housing related, and I will say these are land use specific. These talk about how we can change zoning, amend zoning, and keeping neighborhood character and things like that to address affordability and other issues. As I said, there's many recommendations related to affordable housing specific. specific, but we're not going to get into those necessarily. Stay tuned for the plan and you can read till your heart's content. So I'm going to skip past this. Councilman Hinds covered this, but basically Blueprint Denver is an adopted plan that it's an established policy that we are following, and just updating these area plans give more specificity and talk more in specific to your neighborhood and your context. So we're getting into the nitty-gritty here. The vision has been established for a while now. This was something that was created by the steering committee for the East Central Area Plan. It was developed through thousands and thousands, more than 10,000 public comments, and we tried to boil it down. There are 6 elements in the blueprint. What most relates to what I'm going to talk about is strong and authentic neighborhoods. That's the title of the vision element. And so what you all have said about East Central is that you want it to be walkable, more walkable than today. You want a mix of building uses and scales and types and styles. You want neighborhoods that are connected and diverse, integrated. You want commercial hubs and nodes that feel like a Main Street. You have the old character of the trolley Main Street nodes. Diversity of residents and housing options, and neighborhood schools that thrive. So I want to frame my portion of the presentation on 3 elements here, and why this is important. And so number 1 is that we must direct growth responsibly. These are all kind of under the umbrella of Blueprint's guidance. Number 2 is that we have to address displacement and affordability. We know that it's a crisis in our city right now. And number 3 is maintaining character of our cherished neighborhoods. So number 1, directing growth responsibly. It is no surprise that Denver's growing. We're seeing unprecedented growth in population. So we have to distribute that among, across the city. And so our economists have done some calculations and updated Blueprint's numbers to the East Central area. We can expect approximately up to 7,500 additional households and up to 12,300 additional jobs in these 6 neighborhoods through 2040. And so we want to be proactive and plan for that growth. And our policy in this plan is that we should direct the majority of that growth, in fact 75%, to our centers, corridors, and districts. If you're not familiar with those terms, you can look at Blueprint. This kind of language was established there. But this is, directing the majority of growth along our transit corridors and our most dense areas. So you can see Colfax Avenue, Broadway, Lincoln, Colorado, 17th, 18th, and our neighborhood nodes. And so why do we do this? Why should we even care about directing growth responsibly? So when we do direct that growth toward our transit corridors, it inherently reduces vehicle trips because you have the option. You can still drive, but you have the option, and sometimes it's more convenient to hop on a bus or a scooter. And it increases transit ridership, which we really, really need as well. And in turn, we get cleaner air, healthier residents, and less traffic than would otherwise be if we just allowed, development to come wherever. We're trying to be more responsible about that. And lastly, it does protect neighborhood character because we are concentrating the majority of the growth in our most dense transit corridors. Number 2 is addressing displacement and affordability. So right now, if we were doing good, we would have 6,000 income-restricted units in the East Central area today. That's what we need right now in 2019. What we have on the ground in income-restricted units is 3,000. So for those of you math whizzes, that leaves a current gap of 3,000 income-restricted units that we are lacking today. Furthermore, by the time this plan is up in 2040, more than half of our existing income-restricted units will have expired, meaning that they can raise the rent, they can go to market rate, and all of that. So, these are 3,000 households that are making really difficult decisions today. Do I pay rent or do I buy groceries? You know, do I keep working the night shift? I can't afford daycare. I live on a fixed income. I have all this space. I want to stay in the neighborhood, but I can't afford it because my property values are through the roof. Okay, so number 3 is maintain character, and I'm going to talk really quickly about what's happening on the ground. Mostly, I'll flip through some slides about what's happening in single unit and 2 unit districts. This is the feedback that we got a lot from our outreach, and so some complaints are that new development is too big, too bulky. The setbacks are different. New construction is too tall. The sidewalls are too long. It just looks different. There are words like boxy and stucco boxes, and it doesn't fit in. It doesn't match my house. It looks different. So we know that we're dealing with some of Denver's most sensitive and historic neighborhoods, and we really are trying to protect that through these policies that I will go through. This map shows where historic districts already are in the gray, where they might be. Annie will talk a little bit about Discover Denver's surveying, and the dark purple is where they could be eligible for historic districts. And in the light purple are areas that our team has identified as special. They have special character, there are patterns that are intact that should be protected. And the 40% up here is, Congress Park, and City Park for that matter, but Congress Park far exceeds the most demolition in the entire area. We're in fact seeing more demolition in our single unit and 2 unit areas than anywhere else in the city right now. So into recommendations, quickly to go through these. So our first recommendation is to, Nico talked a little bit about this, but starting with the existing zoning code that we have, there are multiple tools that we can use. You've heard conservation overlays, maybe you've heard historic districts. Those can be time consuming, they can be difficult to implement. So our first recommendation is trying to simplify this by simply tweaking a few of the standards, the form standards that spit out the products that we're seeing on the ground now to essentially shrink the allowable scale of new buildings. And we're looking at patterns on the ground to match those standards more closely. So we're looking at things like, what are the patterns of building coverage historically versus what's being implemented? Sidewall standards, as I talked about, those being really long walls, these big houses are different. Modifying the bulk plane is really onerous, and we actually have a lot of pitched roofs in these neighborhoods with dormers and things that you can't do anymore because they penetrate the bulk plane. So number 2, this one was actually really popular in those surveyed in our recent outreach, but it is to encourage renovations and additions over demolition. And so these would be paired with those former standards I talked about. First, if you want to do new construction, you're going to do it smaller. But if you want to save the majority of the existing structure, we'll give you some allowances there. And so as you can see from this picture, from the front street, this looks like a simple expanded dormer, but from the side you can see that they actually added substantial square footage. And so we know that these tiny bungalows maybe don't fit the needs of today's residents, and this is a compatible way to add that square footage that you may need, and it fits the character of the neighborhood. Number 3 is a program we're calling a character home program. This policy meets all 3 of our goals. Directing growth. So what we've said about this policy is that near transit, allowing buildings to add a unit, so subdivide a unit, a house, if you will, into 2 units, or 3 if you're in a 2-unit district, if and only if you save the majority of the structure. So we're trying to maintain that character, but allow for smaller, more affordable units. It's affordable, so we're not just talking about rentals and developers coming in and buying these. We actually want them to be affordable for condominiums. My first home was a condo in just around the corner, an old mansion subdivided into these units. This is not new, as Nico pointed out. It's something that we're trying to use to address the crisis that we face. while protecting the character of the neighborhood, which is the third one. So in 2010, in the update to the zoning code, there were some areas that were updated to allow for ADUs. And actually, as you can see, it's all of this hatched area. You can build an ADU today. You have been able to since 2010. So, you know, there's some critiques we've heard about the character home program tripling density, and so I just wanted to test this and look at, did allowing ADUs to be built double the density? And the answer is no. There were 15 properties have added ADUs over the last 10 years out of literally thousands of properties. Okay, final, talk about a recommendation along Colfax primarily. Everything in the pink outline, it's kind of hard to see here, but there are certain specific properties along Colfax around transit stations for the future BRT where we are recommending a program for increasing height to the next available zone district, so it's transparent, you can know what to expect. It's an option. It is not a force. You do not have to take advantage of this if you don't want to, as a developer, property owner. This is a citywide policy per blueprint. We are just being more specific and pointing out where that growth should go. Quickly, I want to run through, aside from affordability, the most popular response we got in terms of priorities for development along Colfax is saving some of these character buildings. We all know the story happened to Tom's. I won't spend a lot of time on that, but just to say that we have a program as part of the incentive bonus. We are offering a TDR program, which is a transfer of development rights. And so it is saying that these character buildings that are 1 and 2 stories, they have an allowable entitlement of sometimes 5 stories. So this program would allow the property owner to sell a monetary value for his entitlement rights, his or her entitlement rights to one of the receiving areas. And so that transfer, that density can be transferred, thereby saving some of our beloved buildings. You might be surprised, but all of these buildings along Colfax are not protected currently, and they can be demolished at any time. So with regards to affordability in that program, again, this is an option. So this is an example of a building